and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Did Donald Trump throw a reporter to the ground in Montana last night? Well, initial reports suggested that Greg Gianforte, he's a Republican running for an open House seat in the state, body slammed a reporter who tried to ask him a question at an event in Bozeman. A Fox News crew watched the whole thing happen. It was caught on audio tape.
You were waiting to make your decision about health care until you saw the bill and it just came out. And what you thought
we'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have the
speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
I'm sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came in here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. The last guy did the same thing. You were the Guardian?
Yes, and you just broke my glasses.
The last guy did the same damn thing.
You just body slammed me and broke my glasses.
And the man you just heard yelling was Gianforte. Authorities in Montana later charged him with misdemeanor assault. Open and shut case, right? Not by this morning. Despite the fact he was on an entirely different continent when the whole thing happened, Donald Trump somehow wound up the perpetrator in the retelling.
I don't think it's because a guy who's in office now has said very horrible things about reporters and has said that the reporters are the enemy of the American people. I think that has nothing to do with anything, that people feel that they can get away with it, because I don't believe that you actually believe that. There's no way you can't. There's no way you believe what you're saying if you don't think that's true.
There's so much hostility, frankly, to the press. A lot of it generated by, the Donald Trump rallies, frankly, and a lot of my colleagues faced the blowback from that. So this is kind of an extension of that.
You can draw a straight line from Republican candidates thinking that sort of behavior is okay when you have Donald Trump berating reporters throughout the entire campaign.
Come on. Here's what's actually true. Violence in politics is totally unacceptable, period. Never allowed. What the candidate did last night, Gianforte, was wrong, and Republicans ought to denounce him, as many have. That said, let's not lie to ourselves, or more precisely, don't let the people in charge lie to us. America does face the threat of political violence. It does not come, by and large, from baby boomer evangelicals in Montana, nor does it come from President Trump, whatever his flaws. The threat today comes from the progressive left and its growing enthusiasm for force as a political tool. Here's an example. Do you remember Lauren Duca? She's a writer for Teen Vogue who appeared on the show just before Christmas and delivered a performance so mindless and nasty that I lost control and snapped at her. I shouldn't have done it, but I did. For that moment alone, though, Duca became a progressive hero. Within a month, she was the subject of a predictably fawning New York Times profile. Last weekend, she gave the commencement address at a university, Bard College in Simon's Rock in Massachusetts. Now, we're happy to make people famous, even not very impressive 26-year-old bloggers like Lauren Duca. But you'd think someone on the Bard commencement committee would have actually read what Duca has written before hiring her, or maybe looked at her Twitter feed for a minute. It turns out when she's not barking on cable television or writing vapid pieces for teen magazines, Duca has yet another hobby, fantasizing about the deaths of her political enemies. Last week, Duca tweeted what she called, quote, a cute pic of Trump getting tired of winning. It showed an airplane going down in flames. Duca later bravely deleted the tweet, but fortunately the internet never forgets. To one online critic, Duca wrote this, quote, I hope this person dies in a fire. What's civil discourse for you? So, of course, she gave the commencement address at an accredited four-year college. The left has gone insane. And if you don't believe it, check out what's been happening to non-liberal members of Congress lately. Last week, the FBI arrested a man for threatening Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally. Congresswoman Tom Garrett has received so many death threats, he now needs extra security when he does town hall meetings. Congressman David Kustoff literally was chased by a woman in her vehicle. Of course, there will always be loonies, a lot of them, in a country of 320 million people, and political movements should not be judged solely by their violent outliers. That's fair. And yet when every conservative speaker on campus is an excuse to riot, when every Trump rally is a chance to assault someone wearing a Make America Great Again hat, when your party's elder stateswoman is famous for celebrating racial violence during the LA riots, as Maxine Waters is, it's no longer a matter of outliers. It's something very different. What's a bigger sign of danger in America? One body-slamming politician knocking a journalist down? That's bad. Or this? We've even seen it on this show, on the set. Last week, we had a progressive activist called Kevin Zeese. And his only objection to violence in a long conversation, his only objection to violence in politics is that it might be ineffective. Watch this. Is that a legitimate tactic to smash windows?
That's not an effective tactic.
Is it legitimate, morally legitimate?
That's up to the people who organize it.
So it's okay. There are times when using violence in America.
I've never used violence. We've never advocated violence.
I'm asking you a philosophical question, which you're capable of answering.
I can't answer every question when violence is appropriate or not.
Yeah, by not answering, he answered. You get it. A few days before that, Monique Presley did not have a problem with Maxine Waters defending rioters in L.A. who nearly killed a truck driver only because of his skin color. She did not denounce the attack. On the contrary, she all but endorsed the attack. That puts her outside the pale. Endorsing violence that's the line, and she crossed it.
Right. Well, I don't know if we'd have our current president if that was the line. She has a right to say what she thinks.
Political parties exist to conduct politics, which is supposed to be conflict without bloodshed. That's the whole point. The moment those parties embrace violence, not just committing it, but also excusing it, condoning it, fantasizing about it, they are no longer political organizations. They're awfully close to militias. And the rest of us are definitely much closer to the breakdown of everything we cherish in this country. Violence is the bright line, and they're very close to crossing it. Danielle Ash is a radio show host, and she joins us now. I'd never defend this guy in Montana. He totally lost control of himself, hitting her. Come on now, stop that. But to act as if this represents the right and acceptable behavior among conservatives when the progressive left is literally setting fires is a total distortion of reality, from what I can tell.
Yes, Tucker, thank you for having me. And I completely agree with you in this instance. Absolutely. First off, you can believe two things simultaneously. Right. That Gianforte behaved wrongly. You can believe that. But you can also, Tucker, believe that the media, in some respects, is culpable. That the violent progressive left is, in some respects, culpable. I mean, let's keep this in mind. We're talking about the same media that has ignored the behavior and really underreported, and in some cases not reported at all, the violent behavior of many on the progressive left. This is the same media, Tucker, that promoted the hands up, don't shoot, that left many communities, including the communities in my hometown of St. Louis, actually burned to ash. This is a media right now, Tucker. You want to talk about violence. What about the story that Luke Rosiak at Daily Caller reported, how you had Debbie Wasserman Schultz threatening Capitol Police because they seized government computers in an ongoing scandal that should be really rocking every headline about these two IT staffers that hacked and were stealing government information. But yet we don't see that. Would we even be having this conversation about Greg Gianforte and the anger of so many people in America if media had done their job the past 10, 20 years, if they hadn't looked the other way at all of the violent actions that we have seen so many progressive leftists commit?
And celebrate. We interviewed a New York City councilman this week who endorsed the inclusion of a convicted terrorist, a guy who spent over 30 years in prison for armed robbery, for building explosives, from the Puerto Rican separatist group FALN. And he's being honored at the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City with the backing of the city council, including the head of the city council. Like, what? I don't remember living in a country like that, and yet that goes basically unremarked upon. And just to be totally clear, this is not an excuse for the lunatic behavior yesterday by that guy running for office in Montana. But it's an acknowledgement, okay, let's talk about violence. And it really is real.
Yeah, it is real. And we see it. Everyone wants to talk about President Trump, but let's discuss Tom Perez and his cussing crusade that he's been giving on so many different fundraisers. Let's talk for a moment about the California Democrat Convention, Tucker, just last weekend, where you had a number of Democrats on stage screaming expletive Trump and expletive Republicans, and that was cheered on and celebrated by the entire contingent of California Democrats. But yet they want to accuse everyone else of fomenting violence, of instigating violence, of violent rhetoric. Tucker, I have been seeing this. I know you've seen this too for over 10 years now. I get tired of it. And you know what? Middle America, America in general, is tired of it as well. I had so many people who called into my radio program today, Tucker, who said, you know what? Maybe the media deserves it because we're tired of being lied about. We're tired of being manipulated, and we're tired of them excusing awful things done to us in the name of partisan ideology. This is the point we are at because people hate media this badly.
Well, and I think they've earned a lot of that scorn for sure. But isn't it important
they've gone out and tried to ruin people's lives.
Oh, I've been on the receiving end. But isn't it important to say there is a significant difference between people who seek to debate and use reason in order to persuade and people who are willing to endorse the use of force to get others to obey? Like, those are two different worlds. And I, for one, would rather be and insist on being in one and not the other. And shouldn't conservatives say that? I mean, I get that people are annoying, but like,
absolutely,
wouldn't you rather be famous for like not hitting them?
Yeah, I think so. I think you would rather be so. And you and I've talked about this before. I mean, really, it's weak to think that you can convince someone with use of force. Ultimately, yes, it can be harder. It can be a lot more difficult to use reason and logic to appeal to hearts and minds. But that should be the ultimate goal, because are you really converting someone? Are you really persuading them if you omit their free will choice to agree with you?
Well, exactly. And we're going to try. Sometimes it is like beating your head against a wall. Dan, thanks a lot for coming on tonight.
Good to see you, Tucker. Thank you.
Have the leakers, the many, many leakers inside the federal government, overplayed their hand? British police are apparently cutting off intelligence related to the Manchester attacks of Monday because intelligence officials in this country couldn't keep themselves from leaking a lot of what they learned straight to the press. Prime Minister of Great Britain, Theresa May, chastened the United States today. Watch.
We have a special relationship with the USA. It is our deepest defence and security partnership that we have. Of course, that partnership is built on trust. And part of that trust is knowing that intelligence can be shared confidently. And I will be making clear to President Trump today that intelligence that is shared between law enforcement agencies must remain secure.
So what is this about, and how badly is it hurting the U.S. government, not just the Trump administration, but all of us abroad? Brian Dean Wright is a former CIA officer, and he joins us now. Brian, thanks a lot for coming on. So I'm confused even by the motive of some of these leaks. I mean, some of them are clearly designed to hurt the new president. Some of them just seem nihilistic and designed to hurt the country itself. What is this about?
Nobody thinks of consequences anymore, do they? Because if you think about that, why did the New York Times run a piece with bloody clothes and bloody batteries? Look, it was not in the interest of the nation to see those kinds of details. Certainly not at this point, and arguably ever. So what was that really about? It was about ego. It was about trying to make money. The New York Times, knows that if they get more viewers on their website or otherwise, more advertisers are going to come to them and more people are going to pay more money for it. So this was not about, informing the American people or people around the world about something that was very important. It was about money and greed. Journalism has become greed in far too many parts of our country. That is deeply disturbing.
But the stories, and of course I agree with that assessment completely, but the stories that they ran were based on leaks of confidential information apparently from the U.S. government. And I would bet you anything they're career people, not appointees. I mean, I'm not like defending the Trump people or making a partisan point. I'm making it a point as an American.
Yeah.
This is hurting our country. I don't think there's any denying that at this point.
You're absolutely right. Historically, leaks tend to come from either the Hill or from the White House. And what I think that we have seen in the past 6 months is that we've got some leakers in our national security apparatuses. And I think that they're doing it, again, for purposes of their own ego, to make themselves feel good, or because they're weaponizing political information or intelligence. But I have to tell you that they need to remind themselves, and whoever is both leaking this and, might I remind you, whoever's publishing this, that there are grave consequences for these choices. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're an informant, right? You're working abroad, and you know either that your information is going to be leaked or potentially could be leaked. Do you want to sign up for that? Do you want to go to that next meeting with a CIA officer, an MI5 officer? Or would you want to work with the CIA or the MI5 or MI6 guys? The answer is maybe not.
No,
so that's why this has consequences. That's why this matters.
And you make the smart point, which is,
it does.
In years past, it was the political people who were doing the leaking, and now I used to laugh at the idea of a deep state, and then you watch this and you think, I mean, that's literally what it is. So let me ask you a final question. Why can't the identity of these people be rooted out? If I'm in a conflict with the IRS, they can pull my E-ZPass records, my phone records, they can find out everything about me. We can't figure out who's doing this because why?
This has to be a priority by the FBI, and that's really what this comes down to. And it's a hard thing to find leakers, but there are tools out there. For instance, even people within the previous administration or this one, they still have their security clearances, even if they don't work for the government anymore. Those folks can be called to task. They can actually even be polygraphed. So there are options, but it has to be a priority. And the FBI has to step up their game. Department of Justice has to make a priority. But no doubt about it, journalists have a certain degree of protection of their sources. But there is a breaking point, isn't there? I think as a society, we want information, but there's a point when it goes too far. And I think the line has been crossed.
Yeah, when other countries won't share their relevant intelligence with us, I would say that's I would say that's the line. Brian, thank you.
You would think.
Yeah, you would.
Thank you.
Well, a charity has declared Chelsea Clinton a thought leader for Americans, which raises the question, what kind of profound thoughts are being generated by her exceptional mind? We have the answer to that, and we'll share them with you next. Also, Ben Carlson says most people are poor. The political establishment trying to carry Chelsea Clinton to high office. This week, Chelsea was a featured guest at a conference hosted by CARE, which described her as, quote, a thought leader and change agent. What exactly did this transformational leader in the field of thought have to say? Well, among other things, that the practice of child marriage is somehow related to climate change.
Just listening kind of to the concerns around education and climate change, kind of women's health, child marriage, access to technology, all of those are, of course, interconnected. We have to focus on each of them kind of in their interconnectedness and also as kind of individual outrages that do demand our attention.
Yeah, their interconnectedness. Clinton provided leadership with another thought, declaring that opinions she dislikes are not really opinions at all, and therefore don't have to be listened to.
We also have to recognize, particularly at this moment, that sexism is not an opinion. Islamophobia is not an opinion. Racism is not an opinion. Homophobia is not an opinion. Jingoism is not an opinion.
Oh, so how psyched are you for Chelsea's presidential run? Excited to be lectured like a first grader by a woman who's been handed every advantage in her life? Overjoyed at having your behavior dictated by someone who bragged she, quote, couldn't make herself care about money on some fundamental level after taking a $600,000 a year no-show job with NBC? Oh, wait, you're not excited? Well, tough luck. Being unimpressed by Chelsea Clinton's thought leadership is not a legitimate opinion, according to your betters. Keep that in mind. Well, in a recent interview with SiriusXM Radio, HUD Secretary Ben Carlson said that an impoverished life is often merely the creation of an impoverished mind.
I think poverty, to a large extent, is also a state of mind. You take somebody who has the right mindset, you can take everything from them and put them on the street, and I guarantee you, in a little while, they'll be right back up there. And you take somebody with the wrong mindset, you can give them everything in the world. They'll work their way back down to the bottom.
Secretary Carlson now oversees Section 8 housing and many other anti-poverty efforts, so these remarks got an awful lot of attention. Mudcat Saunders is a Democratic strategist and was a senior advisor to John Edwards' 2008 presidential campaign, among many others. Crystal Wright is the conservative black chick and author of Con Job, and they join us tonight both. Thank you both for coming on. Mudcat, what do you make of that?
Oh, I don't know really what to make of it. I mean, I think freeloading is a state of mind.
Freeloading?
But I think that poverty's real, at least where I live, in Southwest Virginia. And I've been in poverty myself. In home, we call it eating rabbits and blackberries. But I think that's what, the Secretary was trying to say.
Right.
But I think poverty's real, Tucker.
Do you agree with that?
Sure, but I also agree with the fact that Mudcat said that freeloading's real, right? Freeloading, having a state of mind. And what Carson's talking about is if you keep thinking, oh, I'm going to be poor and I can always reach out to the government, take care of me, there's really no incentive there to rise up and work. You can't blink yourself out of poverty, but you can have a state of mind that says, you know what, I'm going to work myself out of poverty. I don't want to depend on the government. And you know what, Tucker, in my book Con Job, I write about 3 generations of a black family living in poverty in Chicago, in Cabrini Greens, right, on welfare. 3 generations, and they thought that was just the way to go. Mom did it, so I'm going to do it. That was just their mindset, was that we're going to move into public housing.
Right.
That's crazy. And Ben Carlson also said, look, guys, he said, I think we need a safety net for people who can't, like you said, are real stricken. They're stricken with poverty. They can't get a job, but it's temporary. It's a Band-Aid. It's not
there's no doubt.
for able-bodied
Obviously,
people.
poverty is real and it's terrible, and its existence is one of the reasons Trump got elected, I think, actually.
Yeah.
But it's also clear that, you know, attitudes are important in everything, and overcoming poverty and everything else. So what are the ways that we're going to know that the current administration is making good on its promises to the people who voted for them, some of whom are poor?
Well, he should have. I'll tell you where I'm from. You can go down to Southside Virginia, for instance, Tucker, to Martinsville, and I mean, you can take a guy down there that's lost everything. I mean, he lost his job at the textile mill or the furniture plant, and got a job as a roofer, fell off a roof. He's hurt. He can't work. His wife's working 20 hours a week at Walmart.
Yeah.
And you ask him if he's living in poverty. He says, hell no, I'm not living in poverty. I got screwed. And you mentioned Trump's election. I think that bunch of rural people who rightfully think they've been screwed, and I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about everybody, Democrats, Republicans, and everybody being the fly over the forgotten world. I think they're the reason Trump got elected.
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. If I were the Democratic Party, I'd make a play for those voters. I wouldn't be wasting everyone's time with Russia conspiracies. Why aren't they doing that?
Well, because they want to deflect. Democrats don't want to do any hard work. And this is exactly why Trump won. Hillary Clinton thought, oh, I got the swing states in the bag. Trump went out to the rural parts of Pennsylvania, Michigan. He went to those people, he spoke to voters, and for the first time you had Democrat union workers saying, I'm voting Republican because Trump's talking about jobs that are disappearing from my towns, you know, from my neighborhoods. It's real. And I think the Russia conspiracy thing, you know, how much of my money, taxpayer dollars, are we going to waste on 3 different investigations when everybody in the intelligence community, including former FBI Director James Comey, said there's no conclusive evidence there was collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign?
Right. And it also seems pretty, look, I'm not saying it's unimportant, but I'm saying it's a pretty abstract concern as compared to what's going on outside Roanoke, where you live.
Well, you know, it is, but, you know, my great party, the Democrats, I believe we've lost our way.
Yeah.
And if you take the message of, you know, the founding message of the Democratic Party, which I'm going to say a dirty word here, Andrew Jackson, social justice, economic fairness, and individual liberties. And let me tell you what, when it comes to economic fairness, he had that populist message, and let me tell you what he did. He took our democratic taproot message and fed it to us. They can talk about Russians, they can talk about racists, they can talk about Comey, but where I live, that's what happened because I saw it.
And that works. It seems simple to me. Thank you both, Mudcat, Crystal. I appreciate it. Well, an optional Bible club for first graders at a Tennessee school is shutting down because it was so offensive to an atheist group that they were forced to shut down a popular Bible club after receiving complaints from an anti-religion group. The Bible club at Altruria, I beg your pardon, elementary school, was optional and was held prior to normal school hours, but the Freedom from Religion Foundation threatened to sue, saying it was unconstitutional because the club was led by school district employees and was therefore, quote, really just religious instruction by public school officials. The club has been disbanded. Dan Barker is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and he joins us tonight. So you shut down a club for first graders studying the Bible. Do you feel good about that?
Yes, we do. In fact, we didn't shut it down. After getting the letter that we sent, the school itself looked at the legal precedent and looked at the reasoning, and they decided to stop the illegal Bible club being led by teachers in the public schools. So there is no threat of a lawsuit here. The school did the right thing.
Well, you bullied them into it, bullied into them canceling a club for first graders. But what's the constitutional problem with this? School district employees have a right to express their views.
Well, Tucker, you know there's a difference between free speech and government speech. When those teachers are at the school, they are the government. And the children who go to that school, they look up to. They're told to respect those teachers, and the students do. But there are families who wish to protect their children from the depravity and the violence that's in the Bible, and they don't think the school should be taking sides on such a personal religious issue. And in fact, the Supreme Court has already addressed this issue.
Yes, it has, and not in the way that you suggest. This did not take place during school hours. They were not working in their capacity as teachers. Some people may not have liked it, but some people don't like a lot of things. That's different from being unconstitutional. People have a right to express their religious views. That's enshrined in the First Amendment. What's prohibited is a government establishment of religion, as you know.
And so that class was a government establishment of religion, because those teachers were the teachers of those students in that school, on that property. If those teachers wanted to have a Bible study in their private homes on Saturday, that's America. That's wonderful. But for the teachers in the school, and the Supreme Court has ruled on this, saying that it's voluntary does not make it legal, especially in the elementary grades. The school did the right thing, and the school should be applauded for giving a lesson to the students about the importance of our Constitution and the importance of keeping state and church separate,
Well, they
so that we can all believe
the lesson that aggressive interest groups with lawyers can force you to do what they want you to do. And that's an important lesson. I agree, because that's how America now runs, thanks to people like you. My question, though, is, would it have been okay with you if it had been an atheist group meeting with teachers?
Well, don't blame us. You should blame the Supreme Court, because these issues have already been decided by the court as far back as 1948.
That's not true.
Yes, it is true.
Okay.
Yes, it is true. If you would read our letter, Tucker.
Please, I have read your letter, and I disagree with your interpretation of it. But let me just get back to the question I just asked. Would it have been okay with you if an atheist club was meeting off hours on a voluntary basis at the school?
If it was led by students, no. We would protest that just as well. And you can bet that Christian parents would protest if atheist teachers were having a Bible club teaching the children how horrible that brutal alpha God is in the Bible, who threatens violence and fire, and a Jesus who talked about beating slaves and gouging out body parts.
Slow down there. It was slow down.
Wait a minute. Tuck, why should I slow down?
They may be, because you're getting onto an ancillary point. Look, you're attacking the Bible. I get you're obviously angry about your childhood of the Bible or whatever. I get it. That's implied. You run the Freedom from Religion group. We already know that. You don't need to slag it on this show. I want to talk about the principles.
Yeah, but how often, Tucker, do you get to hear informed criticism of the Bible? You barely get to hear that. It's been pushed to these kids like it's a loving book, but it's full of fire and violence.
I don't think this is informed criticism. Look, I want to have a conversation with you about what you did and about whether you were representing the Constitution when you did it, or you were just flexing your muscle as a bully who runs a highly aggressive interest group. And so my question to you is, how is any group where faith is involved different from a Bible study group? There was a feminist group. There are certain articles of faith for feminists. Why is that different? It's not different. People have a right to freely associate and say what they think, and you're preventing them from exercising that right.
Because those teachers are the government. We don't have the separation of feminism and state in our country, but we do have enshrined in our Constitution the First Amendment that separates religion and government. We can talk about other things. You can have a chess club.
It doesn't separate.
Have you read the First Amendment, Tucker?
Of course I have. I do this for a living.
Congress
shall not establish a religion. The state can't make a religion. I get it. That is very different from what you're saying.
That's not what it says. That's not what it says, Tucker. Have you read it? It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
That's exactly
you
what
and I have
said.
free exercise. You and I have free exercise, Tucker. But one thing you and I cannot do is ask the government to settle the argument. You see how uncomfortable you got when I was criticizing the Bible?
Nobody is asking the government to settle the argument. These were employees in their off hours talking about things that they personally believed. You don't forfeit your First Amendment rights or any of your constitutional rights just because you have work for the government. Like, you know that.
Yes.
This has been settled again and again.
Do.
But you are a zealot, and the idea that the Bible is being read to kids bugs you, and so you flex your muscle and wreck this little kid's club, and you're proud of it. And I just think it's weird.
Well, thank you, but don't blame us. Blame the Supreme Court. When the letter that we sent to the school explained very carefully why your reasoning is wrong, Tucker. You don't.
Well, Massachusetts is one of the states hit hardest by the ongoing heroin epidemic. A new report from Boston police includes a dark but fascinating revelation. A large majority of heroin traffickers in the city of Boston are not from this country. They're non-citizens. 65% of people arrested for heroin dealing say they were born abroad, and of those, the vast majority came from the Dominican Republic. Howie Carr is a Boston radio host, and he joins us now. Howie, this seems to me, as a layman, to be another indication that maybe there's a connection between our immigration policy and our drug problems.
Absolutely, Tucker. This has been a very big issue, as you said, not just in Massachusetts, but in all of New England. Donald Trump ran around last year during the Republican primary in New Hampshire talking about this. Two of the local governors, Republicans, Chris Sununu in New Hampshire and Paul LePage in Maine, have publicly blamed the epidemic of heroin largely on out of illegal alien or alien drug dealers. And, of course, they're accused of racism, nativism, xenophobia. But this report from the City of Boston Police Department, it's an official document, makes it clear that they're on to something, that this is the problem. And what makes it even more interesting is that we have a mayor in the City of Boston who was offered to turn City Hall into a sanctuary for illegal aliens, while at the same time he runs around the city railing against the heroin epidemic that's killing his constituents. And it's being perpetrated by the people who he wants to protect. And at the State House in Boston, they've cracked down on physicians legally writing prescriptions for legal opioids, claiming that most of the problem is, physicians over prescribing Vicodins or Percocets for Granny, and that's just not the case. I mean, maybe it used to be the case, but no longer.
People are totally paralyzed in positions of power by the fear that they're going to be called insensitive. They'd rather see their people die than be called insensitive. Now, these numbers are just for the city of Boston. You'd think the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which has a very big and robust government, would be also collecting stats like these. Are they publicly available from the state?
No, the state of Massachusetts, we have a Republican governor, Charlie Baker, who's running for re-election. Yeah. And, he's been urged by law enforcement in Massachusetts to try to crack down at the driver's license level. What the problem is, if they get the driver's licenses, and it's all laid out in this report from the BPD, they get the driver's licenses, they use phony birth certificates or stolen birth certificates from Puerto Rico, which is an American territory, obviously. So if you're Puerto Rican, you're an American citizen. They steal or buy somebody's identity, and then they get the driver's license, and that's like a stolen U.S. citizenship once you get the driver's license. And Charlie Baker and the Republican leadership in the state executive branch, they just their eyes glaze over when you point this out to them. And when you get the driver's license, not only do you have the right to drive without being hindered by the police, you're also eligible for all the welfare benefits. Of course. And a lot of these Dominican drug dealers that are arrested in New Hampshire and Massachusetts and Maine, they're caught with 2, 3, 4 different driver's licenses, IDs, EBT cards, and it just goes on and on. And the establishment just looks the other way.
They're not. ESPN has been hemorrhaging viewers, millions and millions of them in recent years. The question is why? A new study suggests a sharp leftward turn by the network is a major factor in this. Deep-Root Analytics looked at ESPN's viewership and found that in 2016, the network's viewership became substantially more liberal and less Republican, more Democratic, more Republican, all across the country. Apparently, conservatives lost interest in following sports if liberal politics are shoved in their face while they're doing it. Why is ESPN doing this? Jason Whitlock is a former ESPN commentator and writer. He now co-hosts Speak for Yourself on Fox Sports 1, and he joins us now. Jason, thanks a lot for coming on. So,
thank you, Tucker. Thanks for having me.
Well, you got ESPN as the most powerful, the most beloved for many years brand in sports. People loved ESPN. Some people still do. A lot of people hate ESPN because of pushing politics. Why are they doing that?
I think you've asked the right question. I think cord cutting has a lot to do with their subscriber and viewership loss. But the animosity and some of the viewership loss, I do think is a direct result of their lurch to the left and injecting progressive victimology into the sports conversation. If you really understand sports culture and all the values taught in sports from Little League, Pee Wee on, you're never a victim. There are never any excuses that are accepted. Every coach teaches every player from 5 years old on to 45 years old. We don't tolerate excuses. We don't tolerate victimology. And now so much of the conversation by the sports media, ESPN being the leader of this, is just filled with so-and-so's a victim, Colin Kaepernick's a victim, everybody's a victim. It's turning traditional sports fans off.
It doesn't take a sports expert to predict something like that. People go to sports as a refuge from things like politics. So why would you throw it in the face of viewers? Like, what is the point of that?
I think, again, so much of the media has moved left. And I've written about this and talked about this, and it applies to ESPN, but it also applies to all the media. Yeah. Silicon Valley, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Instagram is now in control of the mainstream media. Everybody's catering all of their content to Silicon Valley and San Francisco values. That's far different than the old media, which catered everything to New York traditional liberal values. The values in San Francisco, a bit more revolutionary, a bit more progressive than New York, than a traditional New York-based media.
That is a really deep point, and I think a true one, and one that almost nobody ever says out loud. So basically, the politics of a single congressional district are defining what everybody else in the country watches on TV. It just seems like a self-defeating strategy, though. It seems like they're hurting themselves.
Tucker, just think about it. When you and I grew up, everything was about making it in New York. You wanted to work for a New York magazine, New York television station. Now everything, the media is addicted to social media. Where is that control? Out of Silicon Valley, out of Northern California, out of San Francisco. Everybody's catering to San Francisco values. It's pervasive throughout all the media, and you can see it most acutely at ESPN.
Well, you must, you worked there. You're one of the most famous guys there. You must still have friends there. Without naming them, what do they think of this?
Well, I think a lot of them are just now starting to figure out the ramifications of this. And I think there's been some complaints from some of their employees like, hey, look, we're afraid to express that we have traditional sports culture, traditional values. Yeah. Their ombudsman has written about a culture within ESPN where if you're slightly conservative or moderate, you're afraid to express an opinion inside there. It's a real problem at ESPN and within all major corporations as everything has gone PC.
I agree with that.
Everybody's afraid, oh my God, we can't upset anybody. You're silencing people.